All right, everybody, welcome. And now Dave has finished. Not yet, you haven't finished yet. We'll start Cabinet. So, as usual, welcome to Cabinet members, councillors, members of the public, and any reporters intending to come. As usual, agenda items, papers and public forum submissions are available on the Council's website. On housekeeping, can I draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure, which is outlined on the agenda and is currently being displayed on the screen. The meeting is being webcast, so if I can remind everyone to speak into the microphone so that your contributions can be heard by the viewers at home, and please speak clearly. So agenda items 11 and 17 contain exempt appendices with commercially sensitive information, and any discussion on the content of these appendices will need to be held in exempt session, but Cabinet members have been given access to the appendices. So on to agenda item 2. This is a reminder that statements and questions will be taken at the time the relevant agenda item is being discussed, and I'll reply to questions or ask the relevant Cabinet member to respond. Agenda item 3, apologies for absence. We have 3 today. That's from Councillor Asher Craig, Councillor Nicola Beach, and from Councillor Helen Holland. Everyone else is here. So on to agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Can I ask any Cabinet members here if you have any interest to declare in relation to today's agenda? Nothing? Okay, thank you. So agenda item 5, matters referred for consideration by scrutiny or full council. There's nothing here. You okay? No? Okay. Okay? Yeah, okay. Refers for scrutiny by full council. None on this occasion. Agenda item 6, reports from scrutiny commissions. None on this occasion. So on to agenda item chairs. Agenda item 7, chairs business. I just want to start actually with a word of thanks that we now have 94 welcoming spaces set up across the city. And for those that are not familiar with the term, as we were heading into as the cost of living crisis was picking up steam last spring, we were getting ourselves ready as a city to support people through that cost of living crisis. But we started to cast our minds forward to what would happen when actually people needed to put their heating on, and we were anticipating the hiking in household bills as well. And this is I have to be careful about saying this, the only blessing there was about the cost of living crisis last spring was we were entering into a period where people were turning their heating off. So we started to prepare, reaching out to a number of organisations in the city to ask if they could come forward to be places where people could go to be warm. A very basic, and for a country like the UK in 2022, an embarrassing situation to end up in. So we put the appeal out. We aim to have 24 to 26 welcoming spaces, and thanks to the community development team, didn't want to stigmatise them, so we got to call them welcoming spaces, having living rooms for people within their communities. And we set out to have 24 to 26. As I said, amazing response from the city, from community-based organisations, public sector partners, faith-based organisations around the city. We actually have 94 places around Bristol that have been supporting people during these coldest months, not just with warmth, but with food, and also with company, breaking down social isolation and all the rest. And I've visited a few over the time, and it has been incredible. Our challenge now as a city is to say, how do we continue to build on that incredible social capital, we might call it, that's been built up during this crisis, not ask people to continue running at 100 miles an hour as they have over the winter months, but how we can step it down a little bit so people can have some rest, but ready to go again as we go into the colder months at the end of 2023 again. So just to say a huge thank you to all those people who have come forward for the city. Also, the government has yesterday published its final local government financial settlement which is in full in line with the 13 years of national austerity we've been contending with at local government level. So the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities is operating on the assumption that councils will increase council tax by the maximum amount allowed without triggering a referendum. And so for Bristol, this means a 3% rise plus a 2% adult social care precept. And this continues to mean that councils like ours are forced to ask residents to pay more to protect frontline services, but also the backroom capacity of the council that is essential to keeping the city moving, be it in planning, licensing, enforcement. Some of those areas that are not often receive the support of petitions and protests, but actually are essential to the city continuing to be able to function. And I would say, when you step outside Bristol, that councils of all political parties who are serious about local government, have been raising the alarm about funding for local government in general, both the quantum of funding, but also that we're still in a model in which national government provide local government with short-term competitive funding rounds. Levelling Up just a few weeks ago was a classic example of this, where the whole phrasing around we got £14.5 million, and we'll talk about that today. But when I was interviewed on PM, I was interviewed by Evan Davis about this. We said, yes, we were successful, but if you look at the language around levelling up, if you have a national plan, you would not be talking about winners and losers. You'd be talking about an evidence-based sequence of investment in key economic opportunities around the country that will lead to the kind of inclusive, sustainable economic growth we need. The current approach to funding, you may as well give the country over to the National Lottery so that a board of interested people can look at an Excel sheet and choose their favourite project, disconnected. So we continue to share our frustration with national government, both directly through core cities and through the LGA. We also shared our concerns about council tax, that it's a regressive tax, and we continue to lobby for reform. But, in the middle of all of that, we have fought incredibly hard to bring a balanced budget that continues to hold together both our ambition for the city, but also to protect some of the poorest people in the city and the most vulnerable people. But by example, that we've retained a council tax reduction scheme and a local crisis prevention fund. I do say, though, that there is no impact-free way of bringing about a balanced budget unless things don't cost money, and they do. So when we have increasing demand, which is, again, accelerated by COVID and by the cost of living crisis, and very limited finance, and we're being squeezed, there is going to be an impact. And in fact, you can see 3 councils, Thurrock, Slough and Croydon, all Conservative run, have been commissioned, actually been given permission to raise the council tax by more than a limit without a referendum, following what was called significant failures in financial management. Some are looking to look at rises of up to 15%. And that comes off the back of a number of local authorities threatening bankruptcy or trying to go down the route of bankruptcy because they could not bring home a balanced budget. So very challenging times. Not easy for anyone, but you do your best, as I said, to hold together that ambition and that compassion for those people who are too easily and they pay the highest price for the current challenges we face. And finally, just to acknowledge that there will be people in Bristol for whom the earthquakes and the aftershocks in Turkey and Syria were not just issues of interest or concern through the news, but will have family and friends, who would have suffered through loss of life or loss of, or through severe injury or loss of income through this time as well. At this stage, some reports suggest that 23 million people are likely to be affected. So as a city that is of 180 countries of origin, 92 languages, 45 religions, it's the point we've made repeatedly that we cannot work for the good of Bristol unless we take account of the national and international context in which we live. And the well-being of people in Bristol is not confined to what happens inside the city boundaries. The well-being of those of us with international families is impacted by what happens in countries around the world. And I know Red Cross, Red Crescent charities are working on the ground. I was listening to reports of people from the UK going out with emergency response teams. And we will talk to our community development team here about how we can support Turkish Syrian people who are in Bristol now, just as we did a few months ago with Pakistani community in Bristol who were being impacted by the consequences of the floods in Pakistan. So thank you to everyone who's stepping up to support the communities in light of those challenges. Okay, so on to agenda item 8 now, which is Gypsy and Roma Traveller permanent sites. And part of our housing crisis challenge for us, but let me ask Councillor Tom Reynard to introduce this report.
Thank you. The provision of a Gypsy Traveller site within existing neighbourhoods is one of the best ways of improving a range of health outcomes, whether it's educational, health, life expectancy for Gypsy travellers. I believe this proposal, if approved, will have an overall positive impact on the local area to provide accommodation for communities who struggle to find anywhere permanent to live in Bristol or even the wider South West region. 2020 Bristol Gypsy Traveller Accommodation Assessment identified a shortfall in accommodation of 24 pitches, which should be provided by 2024, and a further 12 pitches by 2036. The Hengrove site would provide for 7 or 8 pitches, depending on its design. The land would remain in the ownership of the City Council, but the site would be managed by a local housing provider. Finding new land appropriate for Gypsy Traveller sites is challenging in the geographically constrained, densely populated city which Bristol is, where opportunities to develop this form of accommodation are not readily available. Our strategy for reaching the requirements set within the GTAA is therefore to develop sites as they become available, rather than waiting for sufficient land to be identified that can completely meet all of our 2024 or 2036 targets. To wait for full land availability would mean delaying the construction of any new sites, which would just compound the problems we've already got around supporting Gypsy Traveller communities in finding permanent accommodation to stay in. At this stage, identification of Western Drive to potentially be used for this purpose will be dependent on planning approval, which is an important point to remember for this change of use being agreed, and for funding to be provided by Homes England to fund the site development. I would commend Cabinet to approve this report.
Thanks very much, Tom. And there's been a fair amount of activity here, and we'll have something to say in a bit. But first off, we have received 6 public forum statements. The first is from Bridget Scott. No, okay, so we'll make a note of that. The second is from Daniel West. Okay, the third is from Susan Prythurch. Okay, Alan. Okay, Alan Smith. Okay, now we have a statement from Graham Morris. Oh, I thought we were going to have our first statement from the Conservative. Okay, so we'll just have to take that on record. So next we have a joint statement from Councillors Andrew Brown, Tim Kent, and from Sarah Classic. You have a minute, I'll time you, I'll give you a 10-second notification, okay?
Thank you, Mayor. Probably don't anticipate taking the whole minute. I think the first thing to say is to disassociate ourselves with some of the intemperate remarks that I've heard reported have been on social media with regards to this site. We don't want to associate with those. We do acknowledge the need for Gypsy Roma Traveller sites in the city, but we do have a concern about how the site allocation has come through the system, the lack of consultation with councillors until we pressed for a meeting, the lack of an overall strategy, and I note that Councillor Reynard referred to that in his opening remarks, but we feel that it would be appropriate to have a strategy for the whole city with regards to development of sites, and that's what we're really asking for. It's not a piecemeal approach to this, but a strategy that covers the whole city. Thank you.
Okay, well inside the time. Thank you very much. So let's turn to questions. And if you've made any notes on that, Tom, we can come back to things at the end. I'm sure we will. But let's come to a question from Councillor Marley Bennett. Okay, that was it then for that item. So can I ask any Cabinet members if they'd like to comment on this paper at all? Ellie.
I just want to say I thought it was a really heartwarming paper that really reaffirms our City of Sanctuary values. I think it takes a very human-centred approach rather than viewing them as a problem. And I think there's a lot of consideration that's been taking place to ensure that they're close to infrastructure, that there's water options and there's shower options, so that they're linked to transport and skills and education and access all the benefits that we need to, such as schools, etc. And I think that's an example of how it should be done, and I think it's something to be very proud of. And I want to thank Tom and the officers for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. Any others? Do you want to? I'm going to hand back to you in a minute, Tom, anyway. So let me come in here, by the way. So I've first of all, I'd say we have to be incredibly careful. And I'm glad to hear you say you disassociate yourself with some of the comments. Because to be perfectly frank, when I was reading some of those comments upstairs, I wondered what kind of city we were doing. I will say, though, when a statement starts, I know you need it, but we hear that quite a lot, right? And, you know, we're treading close to the line here. Secondly, I think there's a lot of dust thrown in the air, lack of this, lack of, you know, this is the pretty well-worn trope that's peddled by opposition. The strategy is to find appropriate sites wherever we can. You spend so much time, and actually there has been, you know, engagement from the officers also. I think just not too long ago, there was quite a lot being said about members of the Gypsy Roma Traveller community. Right? And a big campaign was run on that. And I think therein you can see the difference in tone, which is why you have to be very careful when you step into this territory. Yeah, we want it anywhere, but not where we're concerned. Because we can see that this is a group of people who have amongst the poorest life outcomes in the UK. Right? We have a chance to bring forward a site that will provide homes to 8 households, a managed site within the city. And we should do that, because this is about our housing crisis. Gypsy Roma Travellers are just as much a part of this city's population as anyone else, and they are just as much part of the housing crisis as anyone else within the city. And we need to deliver. And at some point, you've got to take a stand. Someone asked the question in one of the comments, what should I say to people when they raise their concerns? I'll tell you what you should say. If the language is inappropriate, and I use polite terms about that, you should push back on it and not just become a channel to make that a little bit more polite because you're scared of losing a vote or appearing unpopular. You've got to take a stand on your standards. And if you're going to stand up as a champion for equalities, you've got to stand up as a champion for all equalities. So actually, to be perfectly frank, on some of the statements that came in, I was pretty, I mean, even a language, someone talks about taking a rearguard action. That's war language. How can we be talking about people in Bristol needing homes, and we're using language of conflict and war like that? That's wholly inappropriate. And it's a dangerous kind of politics to play with. Yes, we're on the local government city level, but I just say we need better. If you're professing to stand up for any values that are worth their salt at all. So look, Tom, let me hand back to you now, Tom, for any final comments and to make the decision which I support.
Yeah, thank you. I think the only other thing I would address is when this came to my cabinet member briefing before Christmas, it was agreed that there would be engagement with the ward councillors. So what email got sent when, or when you found out? Yeah, because it went on the forward plan and then you were going to be written to. So you may have seen it, it's fine, but it had been agreed that you would be engaged with. So there's no secrecy surrounding this, and making such accusations is probably just really unhelpful. At no point have you kind of engaged directly with me on this item either. I would also point out, you know, that offer is always there, like other ward councillors of other parties do frequently on various issues in their wards. You know, feel free to write to me if you want to engage with me directly, but you don't. So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
I'm just minded, actually. I mean, I'm not making any, I'm just going to quote, it's not specifically making a judgment on anyone, but I'm just thinking about when we had Gypsy and Roma Traveller Day and we put the flag up outside City Hall and the Lord Mayor, Paul O'Rourke, said it's not enough to be non-racist, you have to be anti-racist. I'm not saying anyone's being racist in this situation, but it was a statement about our approach to difference and inequalities within the city and the kind of attitudes that we face. So you do need to take a stand. Yeah? Okay, let's go on to agenda item 9 now. Heat pump ready project. Kai.
Thanks for that, Marvin. And this is an interesting one, given your point about stability in government, because what this paper is seeking to do is to note a bid and to seek authority to spend, if we're successful, a bid of around 3.3 million to the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, which as of this morning no longer exists, but I assume it will be the Department of Energy and Net Zero now that this bid is dealt with. So quite an interesting thing. This is obviously a national pot of money, and what this pot of money is looking to do is to develop and trial solutions and methodology for the best deployment of domestic heat pumps at density. It's targeted at owner-occupiers on the gas grid. There's already a national scheme of a grant of £5,000 that any household can access. But if we're successful with this bid, any applicants would have to fund outside of that £5,000. They would have to fund the total cost of a new heat pump, and of course, dealing with heat and the need to decarbonise heat is a massive issue in the city, as it's the largest element of our carbon footprint, which is 40% of the city's carbon footprint. The Bristol aspect of this is a collaborative approach with many partners involved. There is a focus on working with community groups, developing the local supply chain in a cohesive way, and what we want to do is ensure consumers are fully supported in the transition to low carbon heat. We also want to develop a service model that can be replicated in other places in the UK, and a big part of this bid is the support that we want to provide to local installers in terms of training and opportunities for companies and their staff to upskill. There's something interesting about this particular policy is that it's targeted in a certain area, and that's Westbury-on-Trim, which is, some people might ask, well, why are we targeting Westbury-on-Trim for this particular bid? But there's certain conditions around the bid, and also certain aspects that an area has to meet. So Westbury-on-Trim is outside any future heat network zones. It's an area where a proportion are likely to be able to make a significant contribution to the cost of a heat pump. It's larger housing, so that there's space for the heat pumps to go. There's higher energy use than average, so the carbon savings are higher. And also there's an active community group that's already engaged in the area to sort of warm up the people. What this will provide is potentially 200 heat pump installations. City Leap is an observer on this, so we're hoping to take the lessons learnt in terms of how this is rolled out in Westbury-on-Trim, so we can roll that out across the city at a future stage. Important element to this is to build trust in heat pump technology to increase the take-up across the city. And of course, as I mentioned, a major part of this is the potential new jobs and skills within the local supply chain that we can then, once that's there, we can use for other projects in the future across the city. So I'll leave it there, and I think we have a statement, don't we?
Thanks very much, Kai. So you have a question, but I don't think the councillor is here for the path. We had no public forum statements, and we had one question.
There is.
Oh, really? It says I've got one question. Okay, well, I've obviously got a question from Martin Fodor.
No, it's a statement, Mayor.
Right. Statement.
As Kai said. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to support this bid. Obviously, we're having to compete for funds, as you've said, but I do hope we're successful because there's a lot we can learn from this project. And it's really important to have partnerships with local community groups and lessons we can learn, and working with an able-to-pay group, people with larger homes, potentially with the cash to put in themselves, is really important because it is a big part of the climate impact of the city. And we need efficient heat. We need it in well-insulated homes. So we have to complement what people can do to improve their homes with a way of providing the heating. And I'm sure Sustainable Westbury and Trim are going to be helpful partners in that. And we need the experience of the installations and replacing gas boilers. So I hope we'll have more projects like this. I hope we'll have this project successfully and then have more. We clearly need a skilled installer workforce, and we need
10 seconds, Ryan.
Yeah, we need the supply chains. I've raised some points that I think are really important here about making sure the installations are well calibrated, that there's after-sales service, that they work, that the myths and questions are addressed, and that we ensure, if possible, that we complement fitting heat pumps with things like photovoltaic generation being encouraged to provide the power for it, because this is an area where there are limits on the electricity network that have to be met. And I hope we'll also learn lessons about listed buildings as well, which is important in the city too. So I support it. I hope it's successful and I look forward to the results. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Just to say, the reason, and we went on there, that's fine. But the reason we do have limits on speakers' time is because it's about managing the meeting, making sure we're not here till 10 o'clock at night, and also is to make sure that other people who want to speak as well have the opportunity to speak within that finite amount of time we have for this. But,
sure,
I appreciate...
I quite understand that. I could have also tabled some questions, but I just include it in the statement.
Okay, thank you. So, but thank you for your contributions on all those points. There are lots of things we need. One of those things is billions of pounds. As we've been making the point recently, and Kai would be here, the work we've been doing with 3CI, with core cities. We're going to be at the embassy tomorrow, the US Embassy, speaking about just transition as well. For those who don't know, that's about how you make sure that it's not the poorest, the most vulnerable, the most marginalised, who end up being structured out of the economy and paying the highest price for the transition we have to go through. We're making a case for the financing, not just for the decarbonisation projects themselves, but how we invest in the lives of people so that they have resilience within their lives to cope with the transitions that are coming upon us. So I'm sure you're going to be celebrating the rollout of City Leap, as one of our major achievements over the months and weeks to come. There's nothing else in public forum. Can I ask any cabinet members if they'd like to comment on this item? No? Don, did I see your hand moving to the speaker? You were just adjusting your tablet.
I'm just getting excited about the next item.
Okay, just excited about item 10. Okay. All right, thanks very much, everyone. Kai, let me hand back to you to take the decision, which I support and will now be displayed on the screen.
Yeah, just first of all, thanks for your supportive statement, Martin, and it's good, very magnanimous of you to, give us some credit for a change. So in terms of making the, let's have a look, where am I? There we go. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks very much, Guy.
Cheers.
So, on to agenda item 10, Filwood Broadway Framework, utilisation of funding. And Tom, this is with you as well.
Thank you. Really excited to be bringing this paper forward, and it follows on from a very old cabinet decision that goes back all the way to 2012. But also from something we brought to Cabinet in April last year, which allocated some of these old funds for a new Mooga for Filwood, which is the work around that's progressing really well, and also to put 405k into the Filwood Broadway public realm project, better known as Recreate Filwood. But what that has left is the remaining sort of 1.259 million-ish that we need to just refresh the Cabinet approval for. there's obviously a lot going on in the area, and it's really exciting that we've recently been awarded over 14 million from the Levelling Up Fund, albeit it's obviously a bit of piecemeal funding, as Marvin you outlined earlier on as well. But nonetheless, it's really good for Filwood and will allow us to realise our vision to really regenerate the high street, get more affordable housing built in the area, and really revitalise the public realm in the area, working closely with residents in order to deliver that. Just in terms of some of the schemes we'll see coming forward, obviously we've got the former cinema site, which is going to be coming forward for new council housing, which is really exciting and is moving forwards. So we're looking forward to seeing that progress. There'll also be the former swimming pool site coming forward, and we are replacing that Muga in a location that's just being finalised. And there'll also be further work done on the redevelopment of the parade of shops and housing at 4 to 16 Filwood Broadway by the HRA. And we're also looking at the potential of the library site. So this cabinet paper itself is just about renewing a permission that's quite an old permission, but it's an opportunity for us to just restate, all the exciting stuff we're doing in Filwood and the way we're working with the community to deliver homes, communities and infrastructure. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom. So we have one public forum statement, and that's you, Dave, Mr. Redwell. So I'll start your minute now.
Money that I think South Bristol should have by right, but we go to a beauty contest with the Department for Levelling Up, and we were one of the few successful places in the southwest to get the money, literally. Only other place was Cornwall, and no big city got any money. So I think, South Bristol needs the money to regenerate, and Phil definitely needs the money to regenerate. If you quite have a look at it, the high street, the cinema, the swimming pool, everything is in need of major regeneration and create jobs. So I want to see jobs created and more employment in South Bristol. South Bristol always seems to be the forgotten part of the city to me, and it's a site that we really need to put more effort into, putting more money into. But I do welcome this, but let's hope that there's further money, and particularly draw attention really, I suppose, to the public realm. My colleague Gordon Richardson.
Just 10 seconds, Dave.
We're just concerned that it's fully accessible and the public realm is accessible to all. We drop curbs and the necessary. It's pretty ancient out there. It needs a lot of work to make that area fit for purpose. But I very much welcome this, and I've got to say, I do welcome the money that Michael Gove has given us, I suppose.
Dave, we will take that challenge on accessibility. It's something we've been talking about around the regeneration of Temple Quarter as well. It needs to be culturally, financially and physically, accessible to all Bristolians. So that's something I'm sure Tom we'll all be banking, and Don as well, making sure transport, the battle on transport is one that's successful. So we've had 5 public forum questions. The first 2 questions are from you, Dave. So would you like to start with?
This question really is about jobs and employment. I mean, it's always difficult in South Bristol, but I'd just like to know how many jobs and employment this is going to create, or what we're looking at, permanent jobs and hopefully local skilled jobs to develop the growth and the building work, Tom. That's what I'd really be interested to know. And any permanent outcome of jobs in South Bristol.
So, economic modelling to support the Transforming Filwood Broadway Levelling Up Fund bid calculated that approximately 28 additional full-time equivalent jobs will be created for the new library facility and expanded community centre, and 26 additional retail jobs will be created from increased local footfall. Obviously, any works have to be tendered in line with the usual procurement regs to achieve best value, which I'm going to be repeating probably a bit my answer later, Councillor Goodman. And obviously, we've got social value very heavily written into the procurement processes. 20% of an assessment score is favoured towards companies who offer things like local apprenticeships, training for local employees, local labour, spend with local suppliers, and targeted local recruitment and work experience opportunities.
So my follow-up question is, will the council be looking to make sure that through its local employment framework and its contracts to make sure we get local skills and local employment through that framework that we've worked on before in South Bristol?
Yeah, we obviously want to be creating local jobs, and I think that the other thing that's worth just drawing attention to is building Bristol, and the work that's now in place as well for major schemes that are required to submit jobs and skills plans as well. So it's been an increased focus for us around making sure it's jobs and skills and generating those jobs and skills locally. Yeah.
You got another question, Dave, but can I just add in there as well, Tom, something that, again, we've been working incredibly hard as a city to make sure that the sustainable development goals are at the heart of the city rebuild, right? And but the city build and the city rebuild, and the SDGs are about life on land, life in water, climate, but they're also about the conditions, safety for women, decent work, decent homes. So it takes a really mature and a rounded view of development. We've been stressing to all developers that we want you to show us how not only do you just measure yourself against the SDGs, but how do you help the city deliver the sustainable development goals. So that's something that we can, that we're blending as well. But did you want to do your second question?
Yeah, my second question is in line with the Department for Levelling Up, and it's about the point we've talked about, walking, cycling, better public realm. But also I wondered what discussions we've had with the Metro Mayor and the Combined Authority about looking at a transport framework for the area. I mean, there's an opportunity through bus service improvement plan money to see if we can facilitate better public transport in that area. And I wonder if we've got some joined up work going on there, perhaps with WECA.
Well, you know that WECA is fundamentally responsible for public transport in that area and every other area of the region. They do take into account our comments and our thinking on that, but we don't always get what we want because what money there is has to be shared out between the various unitaries. In terms of cycling, we are just putting in our active travel fund tranche 4 bid. We received the guidance on Friday, so certainly South Bristol has featured fairly heavily in the schemes that we were considering. We now need to fine-tune our bids to make sure that those are the best ones to fit in with the guidance as we have them as of Friday, and there's a fairly tight turnaround between now and the submission date to WECA and then on to Active Travel England.
Do you have a supplementary, Dave?
Yeah, my follow-up question is obviously this is obviously a new award and a new win. Perhaps we should go back to Mayor Norris and ask him about any bus service improvement plan money that he's got allocated for South Bristol that can be spent in this area. That would be my follow-up question, really.
We have requests with Mayor Norris regarding the expenditure of the bus service improvement plan money, which, as you know, there is still some available now for enhancement of commercial services. Our requests are with him. As do we.
Thanks very much, Dave. Really appreciate, as ever, your questions, statements, challenges to the council here. The next question is from Councillor Chris Jackson. Chris?
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the answer. But that, in the answer, Don, is a very small part of a crossing. What I was looking at was Junction, Creswick Road, Airport Road, Hengrove Way. We put a bid in many moons ago with our active travel group. And the reason we got the funding, it was Councillor Plowden was actually the officer at the time that dealt with it. We put the funding in because that was a dangerous junction. So that's why we got the money. And then they started building it, and that part by the junction was left out. So instead of going from Engrove Way all the way down to Tesco's, you've got that bit which is classified as a dangerous junction for cyclists. Nothing have happened. Is it Adam Crowther is the officer in charge now, council officer. He told us that when the building work had finished for Bocklock, that junction would be done. Nothing have been done. So I was wondering if any of that money is going to be used for that active travel bid. But we did have money for a bid for maybe 5 years ago that included that junction. But Adam did say it would be done once the building work's finished. So I don't know what's happening with that. Is there any chance you could update me or inform me in the future, please?
I will do. We do anticipate there'll be a new crossing over Creswick Road for both pedestrians and cyclists.
Yeah, that's much appreciated because that does link the cycle path from the Green Business Park to Filwood Broadway. But that junction is the worst one that's for cycling. The cycle path starts 100 yards past it. So that's what we're after. If you could look into that and get back to me, please.
I'll leave it with me. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So the next question is from Councillor Zoe Goodman. Zoe?
Hello, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, very much obviously welcome the funding for Filwood Broadway and consideration of the whole of Filwood Broadway as one overarching project rather than piecemeal projects, something we've been working on in Filwood Broadway Working Group for the past 2 years. And also very much welcome the interactions of council officers on that have been very, very supportive and coming along regularly. My first question is about the allocation of the library site. Originally, the library site was for potentially for housing, and the swimming pool site opposite potentially for mixed-use commercial residential. Given that the swimming pool site is now being proposed developing solely for housing, is whether consideration could be given to denote a possibility of a mixed-use development at the library site, where things like start-up business workspaces or potential opportunity for organisations based elsewhere on the Broadway could be considered to move there. So could that be considered, and if so, how might the community be consulted about potential uses? Thanks.
So yes, it can be considered. I mean, as you know, it was primarily allocated for housing, but obviously you've sort of talked about the swimming pool site, and obviously also it's contingent on the library being relocated as well. But I think we're really happy to give the consideration for the potential for non-residential uses and looking at active frontage. And what we want to do is make sure the local community involved in shaping that. I think what we'd probably like to do is have an offline conversation with officers as well to look at, well, what's that engagement look like, and make sure, we go about it in the right way and engage with the right people. So I think you are pushing an open door to have that conversation and see what's possible, subject to obviously viability and the rest as well. And obviously, as part of that, both of you as the ward councillors, we're obviously really keen to make sure we engage with you regularly on it.
Brilliant, thanks. And I look forward to working with you and officers on that. Question 2, large amount of funds going to Filwood Broadway, and similar to Dave Redgewell's question about social value during the construction period, and how will the council work to ensure that the contractors that are employed will employ local people, or try to put the weightings to employ local people, both from Filwood and the wider South Bristol or Bristol City Council area, and also potential offer of apprenticeships and work experiences for people from the local area, particularly with the South Bristol College nearby offering construction skills training. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a really important point. I think, as I said earlier, is obviously we've got what we've got in place around social value and the procurement regulations. I think what I'd add, rather than repeating myself, is obviously councillor eyes on it about what's actually happening on the ground is really helpful to us to be feeding in, and we engage regularly with the Advanced Construction Skills Centre. So making sure we have a conversation with them about the projects that are coming forward will be really important.
Thanks.
Did you have a supplementary, Zoe? Is that okay? Okay, thanks very much for your questions and statements, everyone. Any Cabinet members to comment on this item? No? Okay, well, we've had quite a lot of activity on it. So let me hand back to you now, Tom, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you very much, Tom. So on to agenda item 11, Housing IT and Transformation Programme approval of full business case. And Tom, you're going to introduce this report, but I just want to remind Cabinet that the paper contains an exempt appendix that has commercially sensitive information. Any discussion on the content of this appendix will need to be held in exempt session. So Tom.
Thank you. I'll probably keep my remarks quite brief. I appreciate IT isn't everyone's favourite topic, but it is for some, Councillor Wilcox. But it's really crucial. Some of our systems, and as I've said with other papers I've brought forward on this as we progress through the business case, we've got very old systems in IT across our housing and landlord services. They've been in dire need of an update for a very long time, whether it's our asset management tools, the systems with which customers engage with around reporting repairs issues, the systems that allocate repair jobs, track inventory, and all those bits. It's really important we continue to progress this. So I'm pleased we're now at the stage where we're awarding to the preferred bidder. Obviously, there's still a long way to go. We know that implementing a new IT system can be very challenging as well, and is not without its risks. but it will mean a much improved service for residents. It will mean much improved functionality for our staff as well, that are able to engage with systems rather than having to do manual workarounds a lot of the time. And also, more broadly, it amalgamates a lot of systems into one provider as well. So we have to worry less about will this kind of integrate with that and so on. It aligns with our current BCC business and ICT strategies, such as Digital First, and I think some of the kind of self-service tenant-facing mobile applications are going to be really good. And I suppose the only other things that I haven't already mentioned is there'll be kind of access to kind of deal with rent, automated estimation, costing and scheduling of all of our repair and maintenance jobs, and new reporting tools. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks very much, Tom. So we've had no public forum statements, but we have had 2 public forum questions. The 2 questions are from Councillor David Wilcox. So David, would you like to bring your first question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'm interested in around the slight confusion about capability gaps that's in the paper, where services are said to be end of life and out of support before you're planning to actually bring the service online. So I'm just concerned that there might be a loss of service for our residents, and I don't want to see that.
So all current housing systems will continue to be supported until the new platform is live. We can provide a really detailed written reply if there are particular services you were particularly interested in, because obviously some will stop being supported by the suppliers, others won't be, and in some cases what we're doing is we're extending by a year, which means that we'll have the extended system overlapping with the new systems coming online, but the minimum kind of period that was offered as an extension with Civica CX systems was 12 months. They weren't prepared to do anything that was less. And just in terms of contingency, it's 20% for our BCC delivery costs, 30% for supplier delivery costs, and 10% for ongoing costs. And the use of the contingency funds are managed by a programme board, which is in place, which I do attend when I can, but I'm there as the sponsor, and also Stephen Peacock is regularly engaged with it as well as Chief Exec.
Did you have a supplementary question?
Oh, I do indeed. So I think you bundled your answer for both questions in there, which is fine. I'm just wondered if you knew of any IT project that had been delivered on time and to budget? You don't have to name one from the council. It can be any company.
I can't say IT is my forte, and it's something I follow regularly. The cynic in me reckons that we may well overrun, and that's why we've got the contingencies in place. Of course, the implementation of this is sort of May onwards, 2024. So obviously, hopefully the new committee system will keep it on track once it's in.
Which is exactly why I'm asking these questions right now. Yes. Thank you very much.
Was that your supplementary?
It was indeed, Mayor. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Okay. So did you have your second question?
I think the Cabinet member managed to kill 2 birds with 1 stone there.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, so we've had no other statements or questions. Any Cabinet members wish to comment on this? Craig?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, there were a number of projects within the digital transformation programme that we delivered on time and on budget, and I'm sure we can get you a list if you're interested, but I think it's probably already gone through audit committee and elsewhere. Anyway.
I'd be interested to see it, please. Yeah, thank you.
The overall programme may not have done that, but there are certainly projects within it that did, and I've got some experience in my daily life as well of success in that area. I would probably comment that any kind of IT transformation, and even rolling out of new systems, if you'll know this already, Tom, but if you don't change the practice around it, you often lose all the benefit of the new system. If people try and shoehorn in their old jobs into the new system rather than trying to explore the possibilities of what the new system provides, so it's just making sure that change management work is done around it. Just add that.
Thanks very much, Craig. So let me hand back to you now, Tom, to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
Yeah, thank you. And Councillor Cheney, it's a really important point around the change management, and the team are already really thinking really carefully about that to make sure that's done in the right way, and in partnership with colleagues. So hopefully that will progress well. In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thanks, Tom. So on to agenda item 12. Because Asha is not here, I'm going to be bringing Asha's papers today. So this is grant determination for the holiday activities and food programme, 23-24 and 24-25. So we have really committed to making sure that every child in Bristol gets off to the best possible start in life. That's in line with the recommendations for those that you know. Remember the Marmot report, I think from 2010. It's about how you tackle health inequalities. And it's why we've made a priority of working with the city to deliver on feeding children. It was one of our 2016 commitments to tackle child hunger in Bristol, you know, a challenge that has got all the more severe, you know, over the years and obviously more so through COVID and this cost of living crisis. This report explains the use of our central government grant funding of around £1.8 million up to March 2025 to make that happen and to support children in receipt of benefits related free school meals. The holiday activities and food programme funded by the DFE since 2021, which we call Your Holiday Hub, builds on healthy holiday programmes from 2019 and 2020. And we worked through a strategic board made up of Feeding Bristol, Fair Share Southwest, Children's Kitchen, Bristol Association for Neighbourhood Daycare, and Playful Bristol. And Bristol works with around 80 organisations over Easter, summer and Christmas holidays, and over 4,000 children benefited from the winter programme last year. So the approach of Your Holiday Hub is to work locally with existing providers to build capacity and meet the needs of children and young people in the 20 wards with the highest levels of deprivation. So we aim to create a structure that will outlive this funding by building capacity, upskilling and capital investment into local providers. And here you can hear the potential to get alignment between this work and our citywide network of welcoming spaces. So we've actually received no public forum statements on this item, but I'm pleased that we have had 2 questions, and those questions are from Councillor Christine Townsend. Christine, do you want to ask your first question?
Sorry, it's over here. Do you want me to read them out?
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Okay, so this grant's going to continue until 2025, end of that financial year. 15% can be locally decided with other groups of vulnerable children. I note in the decision pathway that 2 groups are listed, those with EHCPs and those without course to public funds. Very welcome. So I'm interested to understand why, well, if, I suppose, this also extends to our children in care, our children adopted from care and those on special guardianship orders as also vulnerable groups of children.
Yeah, it does extend to those groups. The guidance states that we can use up to 15% to cover the cost of holiday food provision for vulnerable children not in receipt of free school meals, and this can be determined by the local authority. And in Bristol, our HAF programme does and will continue to use this funding to support looked after children and previously looked after children, children with HCPs, refugee and asylum seekers, and children known to social care services as well. Did you have a supplementary or do you want to go to your second?
I suppose my supplementary is an ask, really, to make sure that we list these groups of children on our EQIAs. This is something that I brought up last week in the budget scrutiny meeting as well. I think it's really important that it's publicly communicated, not only with those of us that read this, but all of the other councillors as well, because I am not convinced that everybody understands how many of those disadvantaged groups are anyway. So my second question is about the EQIA, and it's about the interplay between the universal free school meals and how it is that there is this apparent, particularly accurate, that Key Stage 2, 3 and 4 free school meal entitlement is listed, and that the council's confident that you've captured all of those children that are entitled. Those children currently in year 7 would have had universal free school meals. So what are the mechanisms that the council are using to make sure that at the end of year 2, you're picking up all the children that are entitled?
So, since April 2018, children who become eligible for free school meals or pupil premium, including early years pupil premium, will retain their eligibility until the end of their current educational phase, where early years pupil premium is linked to the primary phase. Now, our liquid logic IT systems enable the free school meals team to extend the end date of all children covered by this transitional protection. And this has improved the retention of children continuing to be eligible for free school meals, pupil premium, after their universal entitlement ends. And as part of our school engagement strategy, we've developed a database of school holiday activity food champions to ensure messaging and information is very clear and to encourage and promote free school meals take-up, enabling all families to access the support that comes through their free school meal pupil premium entitlement. The school also benefits with additional pupil premium funding. But we are, we do all we can on those fronts, but we know this is going to be an ongoing challenge, and we need to continue to make sure children are getting all they are entitled to. And our new executive director will be working with us and with schools to make sure that all students are getting their full entitlement. We are going to make it an agenda item for our monthly Community Development Workers Forum as well, to make sure that community development workers across the city are aware of our commitment to making sure people are getting all they are entitled to. And we are actually going to bring this challenge to the Local Government Association as well, for what support they can give us to make sure that both we run our local campaigns, but there's also national support to support local authorities, making sure that our citizens are getting their full entitlement. Did you have a supplementary question, Christine?
There are local authorities that have automatic registration for free school meals that are attached to council tax reductions and housing benefit. And 3 that I know of, Bolton, Worrell and Liverpool. And I'm wondering why it is that Bristol's not using that in order, because what you've described, Marvin, is the council and schools reaching out to parents, which still feeds into this need for parents to apply. What Bolton and Worrell and Liverpool are doing are using their own data in order to automatically, so it's an opt-out as opposed to an opt-in. Yeah,
this is a fair point. In fact, it's a principle. Listen, I'm going to come back. We'll look at what they're doing, right, and find out what the mechanism is, because we have talked about that. Craig, just to say, we were looking at the opt-in even with Terence Higgins today, actually. So the principle is a strong one. Craig?
Well, only to say that we are working on it at the moment. We're not over the line yet, but we are getting there, if that helps.
I see Abby nodding at the back as well. So maybe, Abby, we can have a conversation, about our systems to making sure that everyone's getting covered. Okay. Okay. Thanks for raising that. Much appreciated. And just take the opportunity. Sometimes, I have pointed out over the time about the kind of the weighting of presence on some of our questions, and I will say you are someone who comes and asks questions about the serious issues at Cabinet. We've got our political differences, but it is appreciated that it's not just headline chasing, it is about the issues of substance here. So can I ask any Cabinet members if you'd wish to comment on this item?
No, I just comment that obviously it's welcome to receive the money from government. It's more welcome, I think, the way we're distributing it. I hope it is, and I hope that it reflects our values, and that we're trying to get to the most vulnerable in society in a way that we always do, I hope, or usually try to do. I also recognise and welcome the work that we do with our partners across this. It's really important to be able to reach out to get hold of people in places where perhaps the council does not have the tendrils that I think it does.
Thanks very much, Craig. So I'm going to take the decision now, unless there's any final comments. So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. So on to agenda item 13. This is Ash's paper again, so I am bringing this, delivering better value in SEND programme grant allocation. And like so many other councils, Bristol is accruing a significant deficit in the dedicated schools grant budget. And in Bristol, the overspend on the DSG high needs block budget has been increasing year on year to the point at which it has become unsustainable. The DFE is running some intervention programs to assist local authorities with deficits to achieve high needs spend sustainability. And we were invited to participate in the DFE's Delivering Better Value in SEND program, which is a 3-year program which includes a 6-month diagnostic phase to identify cost drivers of spend and potential reforms to mitigate. Now, the output from the diagnostic phase is used to produce an evidence-based grant application to DFE. And the value of the grant is £1 million to be used to support delivery of the potential reforms. And this funding aims to support local authorities to improve delivery of SEND services for children and young people whilst trying to ensure services are sustainable. A change to the published Cabinet paper, the grant application will now not be made until 13th of February, but the report says the 1st of February. Bristol Schools Forum are fully engaged and supportive of Bristol's participation in the DBV in SEND programme. Findings from the diagnostic were published in January and are in the public domain. Individual proposals will be the subject of citywide consultations and full EQIAs will be undertaken. On this report, we've received one public forum statement, and that's from Councillor Kent. So I'll give you your minute, Councillor Kent, and I'll give you your 10-second warning.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, receiving money from government's always to be welcome, and we all share concern about the expenditure in the high needs block. But at the same time, we must balance that with that these are our most vulnerable children in the city, and trying to make sure that we don't damage the services they receive is also something I think we need to think about. I am concerned that this programme is coming in when we still have not resolved the fact that there's no strategic co-production in the city. The report talks about co-production with parents, but at the moment that does not happen on a strategic level. I am concerned that the report says that the detailed report, which went to Schools Forum in January, is appended, where in fact it's not appended. There is a lot of detail in there, which I think is quite important, that should have been brought to your attention.
Okay, 10 seconds.
And I'm surprised it's not here in the report. Obviously, we do need reforms in this area, but we do need to make sure we're bringing parents and children with us and making sure at the heart of this, we're protecting our most vulnerable children. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your contribution. We've had no questions on this item. Any Cabinet members wish to comment? Okay, so I'm going to turn to the decision now. And in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. And the challenges you brought, Councillor Kent, will be noted and incorporated into the team's consideration as they go through implementation. Agenda item 14, short breaks for disabled children contract extension. And again, I'm bringing this paper on Ash's behalf. So short breaks are family support services that provide disabled children with activities, allow parents and carers to have a break from their caring responsibilities, and give children and young people the opportunity for a positive experience. Current services are running well, and the extension will give sufficient time for the commissioning team to complete a full public consultation period and procurement exercise, as well as co-produce the new Bristol short breaks after with parent carers. A 6-month extension was previously agreed in 2021. This paper will authorise the full 12-month extension to be used. A budget saving proposal is included in this report for 10% of the overall short breaks budget, section 75 budget. This paper relates specifically to the externally commissioned targeted short breaks contracts, which form one element of the overall offer. And this reduction will be mitigated by utilising historic underspend in the section 75 budget build-up during COVID when services had to close. There would still be a level of in-year savings to be taken from these contracts. However, this would not exceed 10%. The services will then be recommissioned for 2024 onwards with a reduced budget. So, unfortunately, on this item, we've received no public forum statements or questions. Can I ask any Cabinet members if they'd wish to comment? Okay, so we'll be extending that contract. So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Okay, so on to agenda item 15, with me again on Ash's behalf, Short Breaks Innovation Fund bid. We've been awarded £740,000 from the Department for Education Short Breaks Innovation Fund to deliver a bridging service for young people with social communication interaction need, or autism, who are socially self-isolating. This paper accepts the funding. There's a cohort of children and young people with social communication interaction need or autism who are socially self-isolating following a negative cycle of anxiety management. Currently, 129 children and young people with autism or on autism pathway are missing education, of which a significant proportion is because of underlying anxiety. This bridging service will support our isolated young people in engaging outside of the home and accessing a much needed short break for themselves and their families. The service would support these young people through a one-to-one support and commission groups. This proposed service was designed with parent carers of children who currently present with self-isolating behaviours through 4 workshops. This will be solely funded through the Innovation Fund grant and will run for 12 months. The aim of the service will be to transition the young people into our existing services at the end of the project so that young people are able to access ongoing support when funding for the project ceases. We've received 1 public forum statement. The statement is from Jen Smith. Jen Smith, you have 1 minute and I'll give you a 50-second notification.
There are 129 autistic children and young people in Bristol right now who are unable to attend school due to extreme anxiety. This report exhibits a shocking inability to grasp the fundamental reasons why. The Council does not even consider the barriers it puts up itself, resorting to victim-blaming language, such as socially self-isolating, negative cycle of anxiety management, young people withdrawing themselves from situations and environments that cause anxiety. These statements are really offensive. What's actually happening is that autistic children face disability discrimination. This might be from schools, health, or Bristol City Council services. If the Council had been properly supporting families through statutory services when these children experience significant barriers to their learning, this number would not be so high. Being disabled is a protected characteristic, one this Council fails to recognise and fails to value as an individual identity and need in its own right.
10 seconds.
You won't reduce demand on services if you're not tackling the systemic barriers you put up and simply patch kids up and send them back into the ableist battlefield again. And I'd just like to say I had 2 questions that I submitted tonight, but they've gone missing, so I can't answer them.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
For that. So we've had, thank you for your statement. We have had 2 public forum questions. If you think your questions have gone missing, if you can let Democratic Services know or someone during this meeting, then we'll happily have a look for those. So the 2 questions are from Sally Kent. No? Okay. I think that was it then for public forum on that item. Any Cabinet members wish to comment here? No, okay.
No, well, I will. I'll only, obviously, this is funded to try out new things, and it'll be good to hear. And I hope we can come up to Cabinet and hear how that went and whether or not, we have had any success and what kind of success it was. Beyond that, no, nothing to add.
Thanks, Craig. So let me turn to the decision now. And in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. So on to agenda item 16. Yep, the future of St Barnabas C of E Primary School. Now, the governing body of St Barnabas C of E Primary School recommended closure and due to a continued reduction in pupil numbers. And in line with the usual procedures, they approached us to conduct a consultation on the school's future. Demand for primary school places is falling across the city due to a lower birth rate. New housing doesn't make up for the fall in the birth rate. There are surplus places in many of the surrounding schools with more vacant primary school places as the bulge in school places passes to secondary schools. And at St Barnabas, pupil numbers have now fallen to just over 50 pupils when the school has capacity for 210. School budgets are mainly based on pupil numbers, and therefore funding has been an issue for the school, which is why the governor has decided to recommend closure and why we have consulted. Now, due to a continued reduction in pupil numbers, the governing body approached the local authority to request a public consultation on a proposal for the closure of the school. And we understand that this is a very emotive issue and don't underestimate the challenges on children and families that this will bring. However, the governments have concluded that the school is not sustainable. The school and ourselves will support parents to find new school places, which is the next step on from any decision to be made today. We have one public forum petition, and the petition is from Sophie Higgins-Wheeler, which we presented by Lottie Cronk. So Lottie, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Yesterday, St Barnabas parents delivered a petition signed by 2,495 people, accompanied by impassioned comments in support of our school. We also delivered a separate petition signed by 107 local preschool parents who say they would consider St Barnabas for their children, which indicates the school is viable and numbers can rise. St Barnabas is unique, with exceptional support for children with SEND and SEMH and vulnerable families, unrivalled outdoor spaces and a 150-year history at the heart of the local community. The availability of empty spaces in the area has been misrepresented. We have an autistic child in reception and there are no spaces at St Werburgh's, Fairlawn, Sefton Park or Glenfrim in this year group. The schools with empty places are a considerable distance away and some, in my opinion, do not offer an acceptable level of educational care. We believe that the proposed closure is short-sighted and that the consultation process has not been carried out fairly, with several detailed responses, including my own and my husband's, left out of Appendix B. St Barnabas is a victim of poor planning by the council and gentrification of the local area, and we believe the school closure will further disadvantage the already disadvantaged.
Thank you for your petition. Just to say, this is a governor's decision, and we are a partner in it. I am very alive to the dangers of gentrification in an area that I used to live in, and spent my childhood playing in. That looks incredibly different to what it was then, in many ways. But the governors have made a recommendation now. Whereas we make a decision date, there is the time now to talk with parents about the plans for the reallocations and the school spaces that are needed. But on numbers of a school with 50 students with space for 210, it strikes me that the governors have made a decision that just looks at the numbers as they are, and it's an incredibly challenging time. We have had a change in the number of students coming through the education system, and that will bring about challenges and change. So, like I said, we don't underestimate just how passionate people are going to be about the future of the school, not just because of the school, but because of the impact on their children. And we'll make sure that with our education team are working with parents to make sure people are getting the care, getting the influence that they want, and making sure they're getting a good future for their children. Can I offer this to any members of the cabinet who'd like to comment on this item?
No, I suppose I'd probably just comment that we're going to take the next paper on the bulge in pupils that we had through the system. The next paper is going to be on dealing with that bulge in secondary education as it drops off within earlier years, and so there's an inevitability to some of this happening across the city as we see that bulge disappear.
Yeah.
It's difficult, but it is what it is. You've got 50 kids in a school that houses 200. There's a capacity for 210. The cost per child of lighting, heating, and so on will become untenable for the governing body of the school. So it's difficult, but it makes sense.
Okay, so look, we'll make the commitment. Our education leads are in the room now. I'm sure we can make sure that we're working with the parents and the wider community that are being impacted to do all we can to make sure that their fears are allayed justifiably, not just to make them feel good, but that we're doing what we can to make sure we're securing the education of their children. So I have to make the decision because that does move us into the next stage of allocating places. Without this decision, that stage can't be stepped into. So in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you very much, and we'll make contact. Thank you. Okay, and as you said, Craig, on to the other consequences of our change in city demographics. Agenda item 17, education mainstream year 7 temporary expansion investment decision. And Craig, you're bringing this item.
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. We have a statutory duty to ensure sufficient places for all pupils transferring from primary to secondary school. Many schools have been offering additional places each year to ensure this duty is met, despite the delays to the new free schools, particularly the Temple Quarter School. We requested that these schools continue to offer the additional places, and they have been flexible in previous years. The continued need to provide more places now means that capital works are required. Without these works, the schools cannot agree to taking any additional pupils. The works have been kept to a minimum and will largely provide additional facilities for sports changing, sheltered dining, external hard play and increased toilet and welfare provision. Some of the schools providing additional places are PFI, and so the process when they move beyond the contract number of students and for making any structural changes to its buildings is complex. The PFI schools are Bristol Brunel Academy, Bristol Metropolitan Academy and Orchard School Bristol. Increasing the number of students brings additional funding, but the changes to the buildings bring additional operating costs once the additional infrastructure has been provided. These costs are typically for facilities management, cleaning, maintenance, utilities and so on. The changes are temporary as schools will return to their substantive intake numbers once the new free schools are open. The proposed works are to ensure sufficient capacity in these schools for the 2022 intake as well as the 2023. The capital is from the Basic Need Grant provided by the DFE to enable the city to meet the shortfall in secondary school places. Without the additional places, Bristol will fail to meet its statutory duty to provide sufficient places.
Thank you, Craig. So on this item, we've received no public forum statements or questions. Any Cabinet members wish to comment on this item? You know, as you said, Craig, in the build up to this is about constantly adjusting to, our demographic change and the different needs of a very dynamic population. So thanks for your leadership on this. Let me hand back to you now to take the decision, which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
I'd probably say my own children didn't get into Bristol Met, in which we're in the catchment area, or Bristol Brunel Academy, which is probably the closest one to my house, and because the number of places are so stretched at those schools at the moment. In terms of the decisions to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set in the report.
Thanks very much, Craig. And on this one, we didn't get anything public forum either. Agenda item 18, adolescent exploitation prevention services. So at any one time, around 400 children under the age of 18 in Bristol are likely to be victims of exploitation. There are an average of around 1,264 missing episodes annually. And this paper approves procurement of a strategic partner to deliver a specialist adolescent exploitation prevention service, which will work with young people at high risk of experiencing sexual or criminal exploitation and serious youth violence. And it will also provide return home interviews for children and young people who have been reported missing. This service will work with young people to both prevent exploitation for those at risk and to provide emotional and practical support to help victims cope and recover from their experiences of exploitation and youth violence. And the partner will be procured on a 7-year basis, initial contract term of 3 years, with 2 options to extend for a further 2 years each time. And the commitment spend from Bristol City Council core budgets will be £431,600 per year. That's just over £3 million in total. And the service will be jointly funded by South Gloucestershire Council, Health, and the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, with an overall maximum contract value of £9.8 million across the 7 years. So in order to build maximum flexibility into the contract, this will be commissioned through a single provider framework. Under a framework, there is no obligation to spend, as this type of contract does not commit either party to purchase. Committed spend from all partners is expected to be in the region of about £6.3 million across the 7 years. But for procurement purposes, only we will set a maximum contract value of £9.8 million. And in setting an increased upper contract limit, it will enable us to utilise this arrangement with the successful provider should we attract additional grant funding or increased funding from partners without any commitment. Any proposed Bristol City Council spend above the committed value of £431,600 per annum will go back through the appropriate approval pathways. So, as I said, on this item of adolescent exploitation prevention services, we've had no statements or questions. Ask any Cabinet members if they'd like to comment on this item. No, Ellie?
Yeah, briefly, just to say I really welcome this paper and this dedicated investment into adolescent resources, and just to see that support for their mental health and well-being, and it'll see those outcomes that we always talk about with public health, and really embedding sort of trauma-informed approaches as well into that approach and adverse childhood experiences. So just really welcome it. Thank you.
Thank you. And for some people, this may obviously hasn't produced much interest in the chamber, but for some people it may seem like a really distant issue. But just over the last few weeks, I've met the parents of Bristol children who have lost their lives to youth violence, and sat in my office, and we've talked, and this is an issue of immediate concern to a number of people in the city because it is right on their doorstep. And if you look at the work of organisations like Empire Fighting Chance as well, it is a first order concern about how we keep our young people safe. It's an everyday issue, not a distant issue. So really, proud to be a part of this piece of work. But seeing as there aren't any comments, I'll just go straight to the decision. And in terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report. So on to agenda item 19, Youth Services Grant Funding Model. This item has been deferred to March Cabinet. So let's go on to agenda item 20, Financial Update Report. Craig, for February 2023, you're bringing this.
Yeah, thanks, Marvin. The Council's Revenue and Capital Finance Report for period 9 constitutes an exception report and therefore only reports on significant financial issues and movement since period 8. At period 9, the Council is forecasting a risk-adjusted overspend of 11.3 million, which represents 2.6% of the Council's general fund budget. This is a 1.7 million increase overspend when compared to the forecasted 9.5 million at period 8 and reflects an emerging risk within both the adults and children and family services. The Council continues to explore mitigations and income opportunities to contain these risks. The Housing Revenue Accounts forecast at period 9 is unchanged, continuing to report an 8 million full-year overspend. That will be funded from HRA General Reserves. The Dedicated School Grant continues to forecast 18.8 million full-year overspend. This overspend at the close of 22-23 would bring the DSG's carry-forward deficit to 43.5 million. Public Health continues to report no issues with its ring-fenced annual budget of 34.6 million. The capital programme forecast variance at Q3 is a net 15.2 million underspend on its general fund activities, including corporate contingency and a 1.3 million overspend on the HRA's capital programme. Following the transfer of the heat network to the City Leap partner and the release of 3.3 million capital funding, Cabinet is asked to approve the realignment of budgets and the return of that 3.3 million capital contingency to future capital spending pressures. Cabinet is asked to approve the use of council tax reduction additional support scheme funding of 885,000 to assist in full to assist working and pension age households in receipt of partial or full council tax reductions through 23-24. Finally, Cabinet is asked to note the Council's submission of a bid for 5.6 million funding from the Combined Authority for the Western Harbour Master Plan and Infrastructure Delivery Plan project. If the bid is successful, a separate report will be brought to Cabinet detailing spending plans and requesting approval to accept.
Thanks very much, Craig. So we've had no public forum statements or questions. Cabinet members? Don?
Yeah, thank you. Can I just say that I very much welcome the submission of the bid for the Western Harbour Master Plan infrastructure delivery to WECA. It's very, very important that we replace that bridge with something else, frankly. The Brunel Way Bridge is coming to the end of its life. We're going to do some more work on it this year. We're going to set up some monitoring apparatus on it that will enable us to know how long its lifespan is expected to be now. but I don't want politicians to see this next stage in Western Harbour as being potential fuel for their 2024 election campaign, because actually there is a real physical bridge there that's got problems, it's elderly, and that is going to have to be addressed whether you're elected or you aren't elected. So I should be following the next stage of this with interest and with concern. Thank you.
I agree, Don, but I think it's probably inevitable that the slightest issue is drummed up into a symphony of conspiracy and failure and disappointment for election material. I think that's Bristol. Okay, Craig, let me hand back to you now to take the decision which I support and which will now be displayed on the screen.
In terms of the decision to be made today, I approve the recommendations as set out in the report.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to agenda item 21. And this is with you, Ellie, the Director of Public Health Annual Report for 21-22.
Thank you. This year's report focuses on physical activity, and it's really worth taking a look at if only see the truly joyful pictures of Bristolians, all shapes, sizes, ages and ethnicities, having fun and finding exercise that works for them and their lifestyles and benefiting from improved health in the process. Now, some of us may be training for marathons, all in the name of supporting brilliant charities such as Southmead Hospital Trust, which is brilliant, but we all know that at times in life
you can name me, Ellie. You don't have to be so tangential about it.
Congratulations, Mayor. Very good, of course. But we all know that in times in life there can be a lot of barriers to getting fit, such as juggling our family, work-life balance, confidence, safety, cost, accessibility, and even the weather. The good news is even small steps can realise significant health improvements that you can build up from. Cycling with the kids to school and work is a firm favourite with me, but also gardening, walking in the park, even running up and down the stairs in your house all counts. If it gets your heart rate up, it is warding off disease, strengthening your body, supporting good mental health, and can help you maintain a healthy weight. Social prescribing and green social prescribing has a significant role to play in this over the coming years, not least as COVID highlighted the importance of being outdoors to people's physical and mental health, as well as the inequality of access to green space. Social prescribing, for those who don't know what it is enables GPs and other health and care practitioners to refer people, when appropriate, to a social prescribing opportunity. So that might be interventions such as nature-based activities, local walking for health schemes, community gardening and food growing projects, and that builds connectivity with your community, resilience, skills and good health. So please take the time to look over the report. There are some wonderful examples of Bristolians living their best lives within it, and it also showcases some brilliant sports initiatives such as inclusive community tennis, which provides tennis opportunities for all abilities and backgrounds, and the accessible multi-sport festival in Southmead, which brings together lots of organisations and providers to showcase what inclusive sport and physical activity is available in Bristol. And all sessions there are pan-disability with all needs and abilities welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. No public forum statements or questions. Any Cabinet members? Kai, you like a bit of activity?
Yeah, I was a bit of, yeah. What are you saying there? Yeah, no, so, no, really welcome the report, and I think it's long been said that, this administration has a firm commitment to sport and physical activity, going back since we were first elected in 2016. It was about participation, events, and supporting elite sport in the city. So it's good to see that you're continuing in that tradition with this report. And the parks tennis is one of the achievements that we've managed to pull off in the last few years, with lots of investment going into parks across the city, and alongside the free sessions and coaching as well, with our partner Westport. So it's good to see that's bearing fruit. I think after about 3 or 4 years since it's first started. So yeah, welcome the work you're doing.
Thanks, Kai. Craig.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just reflect on what happened. So what austerity has done and has driven is kind of entrenched thinking in various organisations, or retrenched thinking in various organisations, that's meant that the system is increasingly broken across the health system overall. And public health is one of those areas that has that kind of systems thinking at its very basic principle. It's a very Labour Party thing, I think. And we the money that we spend, the work that we do, is all hugely important and is actually saving money across the system that you will never see, because that money never hits the kind of crisis point. So it's hugely important, and I just thank Ali for her leadership on it.
Thank you, Craig. Yeah, I'd say too as well, right? Having come from a public health background, and actually our current director of public health was my manager when I was in the NHS, as we got moved into local government as well. The importance of taking a public health approach to the nation's health story. I was talking to a few nurses yesterday who were picketing outside Southmead, and we were just talking about how important it is to get upstream and prevent. It's not even just a deficit model. It's not just about preventing sickness. It's about building wellness, physical and mental wellness. Not just so that people don't get sick, so that we're proactively building resilience to cope with life's changes that are inevitable come, right? And this is something that certainly with public health coming into local government, public health has become vulnerable. It's not as fashionable to defend local government as it is to defend the National Health Service. And yet we have this vital health intervention in this organisation, and local authorities all across do, that is essential to the future, not just affordability of health services, but I would also say I think it's one of the ultimate expressions of social justice, that we begin to make interventions that counter the increased likelihood that if you're born into poverty, you're going to die earlier and get sick earlier. Public health is on the front end of redressing those inequalities. So, it's really welcome. Thank you for your leadership on this. And I think it's just for us to note the report. So thank you, Ellie. Did you have a final comment?
Yeah, go on then. Yeah, I think you're right about. I just wanted to reiterate what you said about being not as fashionable as it is to talk about the NHS. And I do think that a lot of the time public health isn't quite in the public lexicon as much as it could be, and that understanding, even though we've got a great example in COVID of how we've responded in a public health way to a huge global crisis. But those kind of social determinants of good health that we always talk about, this is a really great example of one of them, and creating the conditions where our whole society can have access to good sport and good physical activity and good green spaces is something that we want to preserve, and that we have preserved, and this administration has preserved year on year, despite it getting harder and harder to do so from a national funding perspective. We're still waiting for our public health grant. So we don't even know where we are with that this year, but if it's anything like the last year's, it'll be in terms of it'll be a real term cut in terms of it'll probably be flatlined, and we're not expecting an uplift on that particularly. So it's getting harder and harder to invest in those things, but it is absolutely crucial for the health of our residents that we do so. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Ali. So on to our final agenda item 22, Q2 Quarterly Performance Progress Report, 22-23. Craig?
Thank you. Is the report just for noting, and I'm sure that the Mayor and Cabinet will be well aware of the performance of their individual areas of responsibility. This report does reflect the changes that we have made to how we monitor performance across the organisation, and beyond actually looking at citywide measures. And I'm hoping Cabinet, Scrutiny and the public will appreciate the new format and the new data that we're providing. But also the way we manage performance and use that data should drive further performance improvements and better understanding of how and where issues happen and react to them accordingly. Is the report just for noting, and I'm pleased to bring it to Cabinet today.
Thanks, Sasha. Craig? I actually do get that mixed up on email sometimes, Sasha, Craig Cheney. So presentation. Yeah, okay. I'm taking it probably no comments from Cabinet. Okay, thank you, Craig, for that, and Cabinet notes the report. So that's the end of today's Cabinet meeting. Thank you to everyone for attending. I will share something, now you've mentioned it, Ellie, that I probably could have done in Chair's business at the beginning, to the 100,000 or so people that are watching this on YouTube right now. I am running the London Marathon, something I'd always wanted to do, not necessarily London, but just do a marathon. But I was up at North Bristol Trust, Maria Kane, the chief exec, asked me if I would do it, and I thought this is a really good excuse to put me in a situation which I can't say no, so I said yes. Did 16 miles on Sunday, aiming to do 18 miles in a couple of Sundays' time. I'm upping it 2 miles every 2 weeks. Hopefully do 20 miles by the beginning of March. I wanted to have done 20 miles by the time I'm on the start line. But apart from my progress, the important thing is you can sponsor me, so Councillor Brown. I can hear the change jingling in your pocket. You can share it with the pit of positivity that is the Liberal Democrat group, and visit my website and pledge your money. And you can even share the link with your coalition partners in the Conservative group. And somehow we'll get the message out to the Greens. All right, take care. Next Cabinet is on the 7th of March 2023.